Without further ado, I wanted to turn the presentation over now to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Amber. My name is Elizabeth Gray, and I am the Adult Audience Strategist at Monroe County Public Library. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I connected with our homeless population in Bloomington. First, I'm going to set up kind of what our area is like and some of the issues that we've had. And then after that, Nikki Needham will step in for a few moments and talk about the Harwood Method that we used to connect with people. And then I'll come back on and talk specifically how I used that method in getting to know patrons who are experiencing homelessness. So let me talk first a little bit. Monroe County, Indiana, we are located in South Central Indiana. We have a population of nearly 147,000. Bloomington, which is where the main branch of our library is located, is the county seat. Ellettsville is another town that's located in that county as well. And we also have a branch that's in Ellettsville. We have lots of cool outdoor stuff. This is a picture of Lake Lemon here that I took myself, so I'm going to brag for a minute. Bloomington, which is the city, is a population of nearly 85,000. And I have the breakdown there so you can see 86.7% white, 4.24% African American, 5.26% Asian, 0.29% Native American, 0.07% Pacific Islander, 2.01% from 2 or more races, and then we have 1.1% just labeled as other race. We have Indiana University in our town as well. In fact, this picture here was taken from Sample Gates, which is sort of where IU starts. This is our main street, which is called Kirkwood, and the library is right down here. So literally, if you're coming down our main street, you will walk right into Indiana University. We have about 50,000 students at IU. So you can imagine, in fact, Amber and I were just talking about when the students leave for the summer, it makes it a little bit easier to drive around, to get into restaurants and to see movies as well. So that makes a big difference. The major employers in Bloomington are IU, and they employ about 8,800 people. Cook, which is a medical equipment producer, and they employ about 3,500 people. And then we also have IU Health, which is our hospital is owned by IU Health, but they also have lots of clinics and doctor's offices, and they employ about 2,250 people. And here's the main branch of our library. So Monroe County Public Library, we currently have 2 branches. The picture there is of our main branch, which is in downtown Bloomington. Again, it's located on Kirkwood Avenue, which is our main street. We have a really vibrant downtown area in Bloomington. We also have another branch in Ellettsville. It is currently just starting a major renovation, so the branch will have to be closed for a short period of time, a few months actually, but they're doing a major renovation there. And we're also in the early stages of planning for an additional branch. We expect that branch to be in the southwest portion of the county, but a place hasn't been determined yet, but we are starting working on that. We have a bookmobile and a van as well. The bookmobile goes to places outside of the city limits, and our van actually goes to assisted living facilities. They're able to roll like carts of different books and different kinds of materials off, and people who have limited mobility are able to browse a smaller collection of the library and check things out there. Last year, we searched over 2 million physical items, and we have just over 150 employees, so we are an incredibly busy library. So I want to talk a little bit about homelessness in Bloomington. We currently have an average at any one time of 333 people who are homeless in the city. We have 4 homeless shelters. One is for families and one is low barrier. A low barrier homeless shelter means that someone who is drunk or somebody who is high on drugs is still allowed to come into the homeless shelter. Most homeless shelters are not low barrier. Most homeless shelters do not allow people who are drunk or high to come in and stay at their facilities. We have a winter shelter, which is called our Interfaith Winter Shelter. It was developed several years back by a number of churches who banded together and wanted to provide a low barrier shelter. That's the shelter that is low barrier, so that people who are homeless weren't in any kind of danger of freezing to death outside in the winter. So it is open in the winter. It moves around to different churches and allows people to sleep there. And we have one shelter that stays open during the day. That is called Shalom Center, and it's sort of the hub of the population who is homeless here in Bloomington. It provides lots of services besides just a place to sleep. They also provide showers so that people can get clean. They have washers and dryers so that people can wash their clothing. And they also have social workers on staff. So they provide lots and lots of services for people who are homeless. We have one emergency shelter for victims of domestic abuse. And then we have 2 locations that serve meals daily. Just one of those serves meals on Sundays. So there's only one place on Sundays for people to go to get food. And we do have 3 food banks in Bloomington. So if you think about the shelters that we have, so Shalom Center has about 40 beds. Wheeler Mission can house up to 80 men, and they only house men. And then we have the New Hope Family Shelter, which can house up to 6 families at a time. When the Interfaith Winter Shelter is open, it can house 50 to 60 people. That's far under the 333 people that we have who are homeless. So obviously there are a lot of people who are not able to find shelter. So although we do have a lot of services in Bloomington and resources, we don't have enough for everybody. So that is an issue as well. I want to talk for a few minutes about stereotypes about homeless people and the misconceptions that people commonly have about people who are homeless, and then the repercussions that these misconceptions can cause. So one misconception is that all homeless people are criminals. There are some homeless people who have been released from prison and they don't have anywhere to go, and so they are homeless. But we also have homeless people who receive tickets for sleeping in public. They can be arrested for loitering. They can be arrested for trespassing. And these are all called status crimes because those only happen to you if you don't have a home. So if you don't have a home and you sleep in an abandoned building and you get arrested for trespassing, that's not going to happen to anybody that has a place to live and a place to sleep. Another misconception is that all homeless people are drug addicts. Again, only about 50% of the population of homeless people are actually addicts. One thing that you might think about with addicts, and we'll talk about the mentally ill in a minute, the people who you generally notice are people who are addicts or who are mentally ill because their behavior is strange. So there are a lot of people who are walking around doing everyday business who are homeless that you don't even realize are homeless. But only about 50% are actually drug addicts or alcoholics. Again, a lot of people think that all homeless people are mentally ill, but in fact, only about a quarter of those who are homeless have a severe mental illness. Some of those who do are also addicts because they're trying to self-medicate. There's also a stereotype that all homeless people are lazy. And if you have seen the typical day of a homeless person, it generally doesn't allow much time for laziness. Most of the day is spent seeking shelter, seeking food, getting clean yourself, getting your clothes clean, trying to find resources. If you have ever had to apply for any kind of benefits, it's not easy. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not that they're just all lazy. Another misconception that people who are homeless, it's a result of all of their poor choices. Many homeless people, due to many different things, it could include they became unemployed because their job was shipped overseas. It could be that they became ill or they became injured and they could no longer have the same job that they'd had for many years. They may become too elderly and they can't work at that job anymore. So it's not that they chose that, but it's just a number of things that happen to them. A lot of people who are homeless are actually employed, but they're underemployed. So being underemployed means that you can't pay for your basic living necessities. You can't pay for your food and a place to live and clothing and transportation. So some of those people who don't have homes actually do work. There's also a misconception that people who are homeless, they just want to be homeless. If you think about, again, just the general day-to-day existence of people who are homeless, it's probably not something that they would choose. So when you think about all of these misconceptions, what do they lead to? Well, the main one that they're going to lead to is fear. And if you fear people, what do? You try to avoid them. So that initially is going to cause a decrease in interaction between the population of people who are homeless and just the general population. it also can make people reluctant to help. So if you believe that homeless people are criminals or drug addicts, that's probably not going to want to make you donate to shelters or to services that can help people get out of the cycle of homelessness. It can make it very difficult to add shelters and services. Again, if you believe that a bunch of drug addicts and criminals are going to move into your neighborhood at the new shelter, you're probably going to fight against that because you think it's just going to bring a lot of trouble. So once again, it's just causing the homelessness cycle to continue. It can also make it more difficult for people who are homeless to find jobs or housing, because once again, if you think that all people who are homeless are criminals, you're not going to want to hire them to work at your job. A lot of people say, why don't they just go to a shelter? And one of the things that I just talked about, there just aren't enough beds. In Bloomington, there just aren't enough beds for all people who are homeless to find a shelter at night. There are also lots of barriers, probably the main one being that you have to be sober if you want to get a bed for the night in a shelter. And if you're an addict or an alcoholic, it's difficult to maintain that to be able to find somewhere to sleep. Another barrier that you might not think about, pets are generally not allowed in shelters. I have 2 dogs, and I can tell you if I was homeless and they told me my 2 dogs couldn't come in a shelter, I wouldn't go in that shelter either. I would stay with my pets. And I do know we have several people who are homeless who are here in downtown Bloomington that have dogs, and I know they would not leave their dogs just to have shelter for the evening. There are also stay limits for the shelters. So it might be that you can stay there for 1 or 2 weeks, and then you have to be gone for 30 days or some amount of time before you can be able to stay in that shelter again. Many homeless people have fears about staying in shelters. They fear that they'll contract a disease, or they fear that they'll contract parasites if they stay in a shelter. They're also afraid of violence and possibly theft. And if you think about the fact that most people who are homeless are carrying everything that they own around with them, that's a great fear to have if you think some of those things could be stolen, and that's all that you have. Another issue could be that the hours of the shelter are not compatible with the work schedule. So if you have someone who doesn't have a home and they're working nights, there isn't a shelter where they can go to sleep during the day. Some people who are homeless have problems with the check-in processes. They feel like they're invasive, or they feel like they're disrespectful to them, and so they just choose not to go through that. Some shelters just don't have handicapped accommodation. So if you have someone that has a disability, then they're not going to be able to use those accommodations. Another thing that you might not think about, a shelter could separate family members. So some shelters only take men, and some shelters only take women and children. And they might not want to split up their family members, so rather than split up, they'll just sleep outside in a tent or sleep in their car. Some shelters are run by religious organizations, and those organizations sometimes they tell people that if they want to spend the night, then they have to attend services at that, whatever that religion is, and so some people have a problem with that. There's also a great lack of privacy or a fear of crowds, which can happen as well. And some people fear the loss of control if they go to stay in a shelter. So there's lots of reasons why they just don't go stay in a shelter that you may not have thought about before. So now I'm going to talk specifically about Bloomington, and I'm just going to call it the crisis in Bloomington. They actually, in our newspaper, this was last summer, they had a big headline that said, "Crisis on Kirkwood." And this is a picture of what was going on, and I'll talk more in depth about that in a little bit. But I just wanted to give you some background. So this may be similar to things that have happened in your towns. So if you look at 2015, we had 16 opioid-related deaths in Bloomington. In 2016, we had 19 opioid-related deaths in Bloomington. In the first 6 months of 2017, we had 17 opioid-related deaths. I could not find statistics on the entire year, but I'm guessing we kept going in about the same direction. So we probably ended up around 30 deaths that were related to opioid abuse. So that has basically doubled compared to what it used to be. In June of 2017, and that's around the time when things kind of came to a head in Bloomington, there were 27 overdoses in Bloomington in just 1 week. It was just a barrage of calls for emergency services to come and help people. And you think that there were probably a number of overdoses that weren't even reported to emergency services. So the spike in the drug use was just incredible. We also had a 53% increase in our jail population from 2016 to 2017. The jail estimated that 90% of those who were inmates there were there on drug or alcohol-related charges. And then if you look at how this affected children, so CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate for juveniles, it's a volunteer organization, and it's where a person is an advocate for a child. So they advocate for what is best for that child who has gone into the court system due to either abuse or neglect. And that's their only interest. The volunteer's only interest is just what is best for the child, to advocate for the child. So the need for those volunteers was less than 400 in 2014. It jumped to nearly 700 in 2017. And another number that's kind of scary, in 2015, the number of newborns born with addiction in Bloomington was 23. It was 64 in 2016, and then it was 60 in 2017. We also had an incident in December of 2017. Bloomington police responded to a heroin overdose of a 15-year-old girl, and they said that that was the youngest overdose that they had ever attended. She survived. The police had to give her Narcan, which is what they use to reverse overdoses, and she came back around and was fine. So it's progressively gotten worse. This picture here is on Kirkwood Avenue, which is where our library is located. What happened was in July of 2017, the police in Bloomington evicted people experiencing homelessness from a popular downtown park. It's called People's Park. So the population of homeless people in People's Park had steadily grown. They were sleeping there. There was increased drug activity that people were complaining about. And so it finally got to the point where the police just went in and evicted everybody from the park. So a homeless encampment was then set up on the main downtown streets. Most of it was on Kirkwood, which again, I showed you that's where our library is located, and it also runs right into IU. And so about 50 people were set up there. They just set camp up there. This is a picture that was in our newspaper, and it was like the one that I showed you before. This, in fact, the library is just catty-cornered to where you're seeing this homeless encampment here. So it was just right there. They just were right there on the street. There were lots of complaints to the police and to the city about aggressive panhandling. There was lots of harassment of people walking by. There were reports of people using the restroom outside. There were reports of people blocking the sidewalk with their belongings. The police and emergency services were called nearly 24 times to the area to respond to overdoses, and sometimes it was for the same person multiple times. So, of course, the citizens, people who own businesses, and visitors were extremely upset, and they were complaining to the city that, you know, these people should be moved along. The other issue is, right when this happened was when students who were coming newly to IU, they were coming with their parents to visit, and they walked downtown right from Bloomington to go eat, and so they were kind of faced with what was going on as well. What I want to point out as well, although this was extremely troublesome, I want you to think about the fact that it was only 50 people, and we have over 300 who are homeless. So once again, it was just a small percentage of the entire homeless population that were causing the issues. So the response to this, the city created a downtown safety, civility, and justice task force. They increased the police presence downtown. Centerstone, which is a mental health provider here in Bloomington Parks and Rec, they created a partnership that would employ people who were homeless to go around to city parks, and they could pick up trash and weed, and they were paid for that. They were hired as temporary workers. And then Shalom Center, which again is our main our homeless shelter, they expanded their hours. So they were able to stay open during the daytime hours on Saturdays and Sundays, which they hadn't done in the past. And this was done because a group of downtown business owners and the city, they put up money so that they would be able to fund this. And this helped too because that was a lot of times when people who didn't have homes would come to the library, and you know, if they were drunk or something like that, they would come in the library to find a place to stay, and that's when it sometimes caused issues. We also have city resource officers, and those officers patrol downtown, but they're not dressed in police uniforms. They have on like shorts and a polo shirt. And their purpose isn't to arrest homeless people, but it's actually to connect to them with resources and services that can help them and can help them break the cycle of addiction and or homelessness, whatever they're facing. We have called them several times to the library when we've had issues. And then Monroe County Public Library started partnering with Centerstone. So we offered, it was just walk in. Centerstone would come in and be in one of our meeting rooms, and people could walk in. They didn't have to make an appointment. And they would deal with substance abuse. They would help them with life skills training, relapse prevention, assistance finding community resources, or applying for benefits or health insurance. And it started off, they were just here a couple of days for a couple hours a week, but it expanded. And so now they're here on Mondays from 9 to 12, Tuesdays from 9 to 4, and Friday from 10 to 2. So that has been extremely helpful as well. So in the midst of all of this going on, Monroe County Public Library started working on a new strategic direction in the summer and fall of 2017. So the leadership team, which is our management team, were tasked with meeting with community stakeholders, and we were to either meet in person with groups and do focus groups, or we could contact them by email, and we could send a link and have people give their input through a link, however they wanted to do it. We let them choose. And we used the Harwood Method. When I first heard about the Harwood Method, I was a skeptic, and I did not think that it was going to work very well. And I'm going to let Mickey now talk about the Harwood Method and what goes into it.
Hi there, this is Mickey Needham, and if I break away and break into big coughing events, please ignore it for just a few minutes. I'm suffering from a bit of a cold right now. So the Harwood Method, some of you have probably heard about this, but I attended a workshop in, I forget when it was, October of 2015 in Detroit. It was sponsored by ALA with the Harwood Institute providing training in their method for engaging your community, for turning outward, as they say. And what I want you all to think about for just a minute is the situation Elizabeth has been describing for you had ramifications for the library at all kinds of levels. As she mentioned, you know, that we did call the resource officers a lot. But apart from that, we were also in a situation where the people suffering from homelessness perceptions, those misconceptions that Elizabeth talked about, created PR problems for the library as well. We were in a place where comments about all the homeless people in our neighborhood were predominating. People were saying they were afraid to come to the library. They were indicating all those things that she talked about, the perceptions that people have about what's going on and how it impacted how people saw the library. So kind of prior to this 2017 period when everything boiled up, some of the library staff had been through the Harwood training, which really asks for librarians to think about approaching action, community needs, library needs in a really different framework. Instead of saying, okay, we're the library and we have this problem, what are we going to do inside to deal with it? Are we going to make new behavioral rules, which is often what we do? Are we going to count numbers and talk about how we need to modify services so that this happens instead of this inside our space? Or, you know, we look at numbers, we take apart our processes, we think about the project work we're doing, and we don't really work hard to connect it with the community at large or to make sense of it as a social and community problem. Well, obviously with homelessness, you're looking at a large national problem and especially a community problem in this case. And so the Harwood Method, which really does say, stop using all those old tools you used to use about how to approach library situations and start thinking about how you make meaningful change by looking outward, by becoming engaged with your community, and by really understanding the experiences and the lives of the people you're serving, as opposed to assuming you in the library have the picture and that's all you need. So what this basically is the Harwood Method is just a framework for having community engagement, for relevant community engagement. The Harwood people are trying to get lots of organizations to participate, to understand what this is, so that groups can meet and work together to meet goals that they set for their community as expressed by the people who live it, by the people who are in it. So it's a set of tools and ways of talking to people and to help communities and organizations connect with their people. It's subjective, it's experiential, it's ethnographic, it is not objective, it is not measurements. It's not something that those of you who like numbers are going to feel all that comfortable with, because there aren't any really. You might use those numbers to support your work, to help you understand what's going on, to do analysis, to think about what you experience and hear, but it isn't the framework that you use. You use this search for public knowledge through community conversations, through exercises where you actually leave the library out of it, or whatever organization you work with. You leave yourself out of it and you try to figure out what's going on in your community. So in this case, the Harwood Method seemed to give us some way of approaching how to deal with this, how to make a difference in our community for people experiencing homelessness. Now, the whole picture can be very complicated in lots of different parts and lots of different tools, and we just focused on a little section of it. We focused on using a tool that comes from, they have what's called a community conversation. And that community conversation is a series of 10 questions that if you ask, hopefully you will be coming out at the end with information that you can then use to create an understanding for what it will take to make meaningful change. These 10 questions, I'll show you those really briefly here, but before I move on, one of the things is that you set up, you don't do this in the library, you do these out in the community, these conversations. You have a note taker and a facilitator who have very well-defined roles that do not impact the discourse. You have a product at the end where you try to really analyze the material you got to create what they called a map of concerns, a web of concerns that highlights where the real nuts of the issues are, where the real rubber meets the road for these people and what's happening. And the organization then has to figure out who they will partner with, what meaningful actions they want to take, how they're going to move forward, and work to make meaningful change for the community, not just the library. So yes, it defines library action because we're participating in it, but it is not focused on the library first and foremost. Is that okay? So the 10 questions, I'm not going to necessarily read them here for you. You can have these from the slideshow as at the end, but they are all very much asking people, what kind of community do you want to live in? What do you think you've experienced because of these issues? What have you had happen to you? What would make a difference? Who do you trust to make changes? And who would make sense to be part of the world that makes a difference for you? And so those questions are the basis for it. What we ended up doing, and Elizabeth is going to talk more about this, is what's called the ask exercise, which is a modification of these questions. It really is just 4 very basic questions. She used these in her conversations with people experiencing homelessness as the basis for what we then chose to do in our strategic plan, and where we added a whole thing about inclusivity and access and all kinds of different things. But anyway, we'll move forward on that, and she will show you exactly what she did based on the Harwood Method here. Here's Elizabeth again.
Okay, so we went using the Harwood Method, and again, I told you I was a skeptic, and I was, because I thought we shouldn't ask these huge general questions. We're never going to get anything good out of it. But I decided to move forward and do as I was asked, and I contacted different groups, but I'm focusing now on visiting the Shalom Center. So I emailed them, and I received a response from the assistant director who said that she would like me to come and do a focus group at the Shalom Center. And this is just briefly the email that I sent to her. So I went to them. I didn't expect them to come to me, but I went to them, and I let them choose the date and time that worked for them. I also brought pizza and soda because I thought that might be a little more incentive to get people to come. And I had 12 attendees, which is really good. When you're doing a focus group, 10 to 12 is probably a good number. If you get more than that, it's really hard to get other people to be able to talk. You want everybody to be able to give input. And also something I want to mention when I ask these questions, and this was kind of hard for me because I'm sort of I wear my heart on my sleeve type of person, but you are not there to respond to what they say. So even if they said something about the library that wasn't the way the library really runs, I couldn't respond as I wanted to and jump in and be like, no, that's not how the library is. I had to just be basically, I was the person there to just get their feedback. So I went there, I had 12 people, they were eating pizza and drinking soda, and all of them are people who are currently homeless. And so I asked them our questions. We decided to narrow it down to 4 questions. And so the 4 questions were, what kind of community do you want to live in? What do you believe are the 2 or 3 most important issues facing our community? What types of services and resources do you think Monroe County Public Library should provide to meet our community's needs? And thinking of our community in 5 to 10 years, what would the ideal MCPL be like? So I'm going to talk to you about the responses that I received from the clients at Shalom Center, and then I'll tell you how those compare to the overall responses that we got from the community at large. So the first question, what kind of community do you want to live in? And what I heard most often at Shalom Center was kind and understanding, a compassionate community, a non-judgmental community, a safe community, a non-discriminatory community. And interestingly enough, the top community responses overall were we lumped in welcoming, accepting, inclusive, and open-minded all in one, safe, and then caring, kind, helpful, and compassionate. So they were basically the exact same responses that we received both from clients of Shalom Center, people who don't have anywhere to live, and the community as a whole. So the second one, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most important issues facing our community? Responses from Shalom Center clients: homelessness, addiction, a lack of mental health resources, a lack of affordable housing, racism, economic disparity, and crime. And our top community responses were affordable housing, opioids and addiction, and homelessness. So once again, we had quite a bit of overlap between the community at large and what the clients of Shalom Center felt like were the most important things facing our community. What types of services and resources do you think MCPL should provide to meet our community's needs? This was my favorite answer. Somebody said, I think you should have more branches. I think anywhere I go in town, you should just have a branch there. And I was like, well, we would like to do that too. Sadly, we do not have the money or staff for that. They just wanted us to have libraries everywhere. They mentioned job training, computer classes. They mentioned finding ways to bring all people together, which I thought was very interesting. And they also mentioned assistance with rehab and recovery. And our top community responses: life skills, job and career resources, serving at-risk populations, and continued materials and programming. And then the last question, thinking of our community in 5 to 10 years, what would the ideal MCPL be like? And Shalom residents, or I'm sorry, Shalom clients said, the same, but with even more services. The library should just come directly to us, more branches, more technology, and work more with the community. And by that, they meant the other organizations, for us to partner more with other organizations. So the community responses were up-to-date technology, tech help and computers, more branch locations, and again, books, materials, and e-content. So as you see, there was lots of overlap between the ideas and the thoughts that the folks at Shalom Center had and the people that were Bloomington at large had. I might mention something on this, the response to this final question as well. We had a lot of responses from people who replied through our link, and you could say anything you wanted. So it was just a big block where you could write in any text that you wanted. And so lots of people wrote things that they felt were wrong with the library. And interestingly enough, one of the top concerns that came up was that homelessness and issues concerned with safety at the library were in our top 3 issues as barriers to service at the library. So we needed to make sure that we thought about that as well. I just also wanted to mention some additional comments that I got. I would not have gotten these comments had we asked very specific questions like, what kind of programming do you think the library should have? Probably the one that I found the most fascinating was a man said, it's Cook, IU, and the library. Those are the big 3 in Bloomington. You should use your voice more in the community. So I just found it fascinating that he literally felt like that was sort of the status of the library. And somebody else said, well, we don't mean to come in drunk and cause problems. And then a woman who was there just looked at him and said, you all need to get some act right, which I thought was very humorous too. They also said, we know which librarians are nice to us, and we wait for them when we need something. And so that was a little bit disheartening, because whether people are generally just the way they come off, it doesn't seem as friendly, or if they just really are uncomfortable, dealing with people who are homeless, it's definitely something that we need to be aware of and that we need to work on. So out of all of this information from the community, we got 4 goals for strategic direction. And the one that we chose to focus on as the adult core group, we decided to focus on promote a climate of civility, inclusiveness, and compassion. So we took that, and as we worked with staff members on their work plans, we wanted to try and have everybody address it in some way in their work plans. We wanted to think about programming and ways that we could do this through our programming. And then since I am responsible for the adult core group, I had to prepare an action plan that told different ways that we were going to address the strategic direction goal and how we would, somehow address this. So some of the things that the library is doing to respond to this, we started having computer classes at Crawford Apartments. Crawford Apartments were apartments that were built for people who have experienced homelessness long term. Along with their apartment, they got computers, they got laptops. So we went with some volunteers from what used to be SLIS, but now it's the School of Computing and Informatics. There are volunteers who do tech help, and they went with some of our staff members to the Crawford Apartments, and they are doing computer training. So it's everything from like very basic how to just use the computer, up to like how to try and find a job online and things like that. I mentioned that we increased the hours for Centerstone being at the library to offer help for people. We created a program that was called Coffee and Conversations. And so what that is we have different groups within the community come in and talk a little bit about what their group does. And then community members can ask them any kind of questions that they want to ask them. We just started doing that, and we've had the Bloomington City Council come, and we also had the Bloomington Refugee Support Network come. I'm hopeful that maybe we'll be able to have a representative from the Shalom Center at some point come in and do that as well. We created a VITAL team. So our VITAL is volunteers and tutoring adult learners. And so we created a team to look at maybe areas where we're not addressing the needs of the people who use VITAL services. And so one thing that we wanted to do was start a job search assistance drop-in time. So people can just come in. Well, we're going to set times. We haven't started it yet, but they're gearing up. We're going to set times when there will be staff available, and people can just drop in and use the computers to look for jobs. They can be shown how to find jobs online, how to fill out online applications, as well as how to create resumes and things like that. In October, we are going to do a Human Library project. If you're not familiar with that, the Human Library organization started it. It's where you have people who represent different groups in the community who maybe there are, things that people don't understand about them. And they're a book for the day, and a patron can come in and check them out, and then they can sit down and have a one-on-one conversation. We're hoping to have somebody who either is currently experiencing homelessness or has in the past be one of our books. And then someone can sit down, because it's a whole lot different if you sit down and chat with somebody face to face and understand what they have gone through and dealing with homelessness than if you just walk past them on the street and you can ignore them. So we're hoping that that'll bring about some changes as well. We're also partnering with the city. They are doing a mental health 101 training, and they have allowed us 2 days to have our staff trained with the mental health 101. So hopefully that'll help us deal better with people who are experiencing mental health issues and be more compassionate when we do deal with them. The outcomes that we're looking for when we're doing these things, we want patrons to discuss differing ideas, attitudes, and beliefs with compassion. We want patrons to learn about those who are different from themselves. And we want patrons to interact with community members different from themselves as well. We want our community to embrace differences. And we would like marginalized community groups to become integrated with the mainstream community. That's definitely something that we want to look at when we're talking about people who have been experiencing homelessness. My last slide here gives you some resources. The first is a book that was published by ALA. It's The Librarian's Guide to Homelessness, an empathy-driven approach to solving problems, preventing conflict, and serving everyone. It's a fantastic book. I read it very recently, and it just sort of gives you a different take on homelessness. Makes you think about things from a perspective that you may not have considered before. I also put links to the Safety, Civility, and Justice initiative that the City of Bloomington has done. It explains it really well in there. A link to the Harwood Institute, which Mickey talked about, and then a link to the Human Library Organization. In case you're not familiar with it, that can show you what that is. I know our emails are available, so you can ask us questions there, but I did want to leave a few minutes here at the end. If there were any questions, we can answer those as well. There you go.
Hi, this is Amber Painter again. I just wanted to highlight that if you need an LEU for today's session, all you need to do is select the LEU option and then download the file. It'll be downloaded as a protected Word document, so you can edit it to add your own name, save a copy for your records. Mickey and Elizabeth have also offered us the PowerPoint slides, which you can also download today. We're going to keep this window up until 3 p.m., so you have some time to download both. I see that Amy Cole mentioned that Ryan Dowd has an excellent newsletter, so if you go to his website, you should be able to subscribe to that. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Elizabeth and Mickey for questions.
I see here there's a question about circulation policies regarding individuals experiencing homelessness. That is something that I can address at least briefly here. We do allow for modifications to our existing circulation rules and regulations, mostly concerning regular addresses. The address need is when we issue new cards, everyone does have to provide proof of an address in Monroe County. And this does create challenges for people experiencing homelessness. So what we worked out was an agreement that with the Shalom Center and the other shelters in the community, that they can provide, if they can send a letter in and say that they will accept mail for this patron at that place, we will go ahead and issue a card based on that address. So that's the one real barrier we got around with that. Experiencing homelessness, it's just that address verification that created that barrier for us. Yeah.
The library also accepts a letter from the shelter.
Yeah. I'm going to ask if anyone has any other questions, because that usually prompts it.
Does anybody else have any other questions for myself or Mickey? We're happy to answer anything at all. I will add on just to what Mickey said, and we don't limit people who are homeless from checking out. They have the same checkout rules as everybody else, so they can check out anything just like anybody else could. Customer service training. So somebody asked if we have customer service training specifically dealing with marginalized populations such as the homeless, or methods to encourage further professional development in that regard. When we had staff day most recently, yes, we did have a session that specifically dealt with, it was actually the people from Centerstone who come here and provide services, and they came and specifically talked to us about issues that you might have in dealing with people who are homeless or people who are experiencing mental health issues. They did talk a little bit about how to deal with exactly what the next question is, dealing with aggression or delusions or things like that. So they did explain some of that. Previously we had one, and I will tell you the best thing that I ever learned in dealing with somebody who's having a delusion is just to not feed into the delusion, but to literally ask them something very simple like, what did you have for lunch today? And I've used that on more than one occasion, and it actually works. It snaps them out of their delusion, and it just brings them back to where they are. The guy that did that training, I think he was from Centerstone too, he said it will be a relief to them because it just like forces them to like come back into where we're at today, and it actually worked really well. Let me give it, I think Mickey wanted to say something. Let me let her talk for a second.
We have definitely that focus is going to be ongoing in our training, because this mental health sessions we're doing in the coming months will be focused on problem behaviors, things that was strategies for working with people who are experiencing problems. We do have problems with behavior in the library, like every library. And we do have a policy, was a question someone asked, about sleeping in the library. It's one of those behavioral policy pieces that people feel very strongly about one way or the other. And, we talk at various points about modifying it, but we do have one that says you're not allowed to sleep while you're in the library. And we do enforce it. And we do have security that does that. So it isn't much, the staff themselves don't often interact with people on that basis, but security does do that for us. I hope that answers that question. I've kind of lost track of where we are here. Not sure.
Silverstone, no, say Centerstone.
Centerstone, sorry. Yeah, Centerstone is the group here in Bloomington. I don't know if they travel elsewhere. Let me let Elizabeth talk about that.
Actually, I think Centerstone is located in other places. I'm not sure if it's called Centerstone, but I know that they're located in other places as well. But the other question also asked if we have people complain about the homeless population, and we do. We get lots of complaints about that. I have had people complain to me literally in person, and I had somebody tell me that the man who was homeless was not really a person. And so I let them know that, in fact, he was a person, and that everybody who is using the library appropriately is welcome to use the library in the same way, and it does not matter where you live or what you do for a living. But we do get complaints. We had a lot of complaints. I'd say 5 to 7 years ago, we had a big problem with problem behaviors in the library, and we were having lots and lots of complaints. And we had to really shore up our behavioral policies, and we had to really shore up enforcing those. It took some time, but we were really cognizant about doing it appropriately. And it went so well that when our transportation department built a new bus station, they came to us and asked for us to do the same training that we had done. It takes time, though, because previously we didn't have very specific behavioral rules. We'd just be like, don't bother other people, which isn't really a rule. So we had to spell those out very specifically. You can't, if you're drunk or under the influence of anything, you can't be in the library and things like that. So we had to have some very specific rules that we could point to and deal with those problem behaviors, and that did help turn it around. Quite a bit. Did you share the results of your community conversations back with the community, or just internally? We shared them internally, and we shared them with the board of directors, which of course then that's always available to the public, but we didn't specifically share them with the public. We did reach out back to each of the groups that we contacted and tell them that if they were interested, that we would forward those results onto them. I know the people that I worked with, nobody responded and said that they wanted to see the results. But it'll come out when we put out our annual report. Thank you. I can think of it. The annual report. It'll have a listing of what we've planned for our new strategic plan for the ongoing few years. Did you do specific planning and training with the local police force? Are you in agreement about how to handle issues for people experiencing homelessness? So the only training that the police have done with us, they actually came in and did an active shooter training. Actually, that was at my request, just because I felt like, if you're prepared for everything, then you're better able to handle it. So I just felt like we should be prepared. So they haven't done any training with us, but they're really good. Whenever we call, the police force is very close. The actual office is very close to where the library is. It's just a few blocks away. But when we call, they're really good about coming. Lots of times we call and just ask if they'll send a resource officer, because we just know that somebody they need assistance, or they need, we can tell that they're having mental health issues. Or we had a guy who, he was having trouble getting together all of his bus fare. And so we just called the resource officer, because they're really good about finding ways that aren't intimidating, that they can help people like that. So it's actually been a pretty good relationship that we've had with them.
And they've had coffee and conversations.
Oh, that's right. We have had coffee with a cop, we called it. actually we had pizza with the cop one time too. So we would have like coffee and donuts, or we would order pizza, and then the resource officers would come in and they would just chat with staff. And so it kind of gave us, a chance to get to know each other and to talk to each other about issues we're having and things like that. The police do sometimes just come in here on their patrols, and again, it's the resource officers usually, and they'll just kind of stroll through the library, just to kind of make sure that everything's okay. So we have a good relationship with the police. Do you have anything else you want to say, Nikki? Do you have any other questions? I think we're just about out of time. Thank you all. Yeah, I really appreciated your time, and I hope this was useful information for you. So thank you. Here's Amber.
All right, we're going to keep the file share box open until 3 p.m. And if anybody needs an LEU, this will be your last opportunity to download one here. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you. Bye.